Hello and welcome to the third in a series of dental negligence vlogs from the Clinical Negligence Group at No. 5 Chambers. These vlogs are aimed at giving dental negligence lawyers an insight from dental experts as to how they think that lawyers can improve their chances of success and also run their cases more efficiently, thus reducing their costs. Today we're going to be talking about the importance of communication between expert and lawyer when working on dental negligence cases and how that can be improved. My name is Louisa Sherlock and I'm going to be your host today. I'm a barrister at No. 5 Chambers and I practiced as a dentist for over a decade before becoming a barrister. For those of you who haven't seen vlog 2 in this series, I'm joined again by Mr. Richard Adams, who is a very experienced senior junior clinical negligence barrister at No. 5 Chambers. I'm also joined by 2 experts. Dr. Mike Young, who was a dentist and dental practice owner for over 25 years, a dental expert for over 20 years, and author of 2 books. The first being the prize-winning Managing a Dental Practice the Genghis Khan Way, and the second, The Effective and Efficient Clinical Negligence Expert Witness. Dr. Lucy Nichols qualified as a dental surgeon 20 years ago. She's a member of the Royal College of Surgeons and has been doing expert witness work for 6 years. She currently completes around 200 reports a year for law firms, dental indemnifiers, and the General Dental Council. Mike, can you start us off on this one by explaining why communication between lawyer and expert is so important?
Well, I think it's fundamental. I think it doesn't matter what business you're in. I think communicating with colleagues, customers, clients, everybody is so key to running an effective business. I know that most of the communication between experts and lawyers is done in writing for good reason. But I know when I was practicing as an expert, I wasn't averse to picking up the phone, talking directly to the lawyer. Maybe if I just had a small question about the case, or if part of the records hadn't been sent to me, and I think it's important to build up some sort of rapport as well with the lawyers from the expert point of view, and vice versa. The lawyers, I think, really need to try to connect with the experts. So that's my view on it. And I think dentists tend to be good communicators because they have to communicate, with patients every day, in close contact and in close contact with the dental nurses and their staff. And I've come across lots of dentists over the years, and most of them are very good communicators.
Yes. Lucy, do you have anything to add?
I think these days the communication is almost all through email. And generally speaking, it works very well. There are occasions where, like Mike, I may want to pick up the phone. Sometimes there might be something in particular that it's just easier to have a conversation with, a flowing conversation, rather than keep emailing backwards and forwards when you might send an email and then you might not get a reply till the next day and you actually just need to have a little chat about something. The difficulty that I do find, though, with phone calls is that there will usually be a phone call listed with the solicitor's instructions, but it's not always a direct dial. And even if it is, they're very often not at their desk. So it can actually be quite difficult to get a hold of somebody on the phone. But when you can get a hold of somebody on the phone, you often have a conversation that can be very worthwhile and more beneficial than and more streamlined than trying to send emails backwards and forwards over the course of a few days.
Yes, because I can imagine it might be difficult to build up a rapport if your communication is solely by email. and you might not get a feel for what it is exactly that solicitors' view is on the case just by reading something. Sometimes just speaking to someone, listening to the tone, and
absolutely,
yes,
communicate so much.
But one of the problems that crops up a lot on the WhatsApp group that I run, which Lucy's a member of, is that even if you email solicitors, they can be so slow at replying, and the momentum of the case sort of loses itself. That's a common problem. It's a problem you have, I think, Lucy, isn't it? I think you've...
Yeah, it can be difficult. Sometimes you'll get a reply the same day or the next day. Sometimes you won't get a reply for a month, depending on who it is in the case.
Yeah.
So do you think then that perhaps sort of arranging a time to have a conversation when you're both free and you can both dedicate some time to talking about the case is helpful, would be helpful?
I probably wouldn't arrange that at the outset, because often it won't be needed, and then it just fills up my diary with more calls when I already have limited space in my diary. But I don't know, sometimes it would be useful if there was a phone number that was definitely a direct dial and was a reliable way to get hold of somebody. I appreciate that my phone number, which I do give, is my mobile number, and it's not necessarily a reliable way to get hold of me because I spend a good part of my week treating patients, so I'm not able to answer the phone.
Yeah.
That's the difficulty, isn't it? When people are busy, it is really difficult sometimes to get a time when you're both free. And Mike, the WhatsApp group you're describing, that's a general group, isn't it, for experts, where you discuss your experiences and difficulties and so on?
Well, it's for dental experts, yes. It's evolved into a support group. Cases are discussed, but in very, very general terms and in ways in which the parties involved can't be identified. And we discuss things, people raise questions. One thing I've discovered is that a lot of experts find it a very lonely job. So I think having colleagues to chat to, and we don't always just talk about dental expert work. So it's nice in that way. Yeah, it's good. And as you know, Louisa, we have meetings, Zoom meetings, where we invite guests to come and talk about topics to us. So it's an educational thing. It's good. Yeah.
Yes, I've been to one or two, and it's always been interesting.
Yeah.
So it's talking about communication, good to have communication between experts as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Richard, do you have anything to add from a barrister's perspective about communication between the expert and the lawyer?
Yeah, well, by far and away, the most important means of communication from a barrister's perspective is the conference. It is absolutely critical in every single case that there is a conference at which the expert, the solicitor, the barrister, and the lay client are present. And the prospect of having a case without a conference it's just an anathema. So communication is absolutely critical. And obviously over the past year, we've all become a lot better at doing conferences remotely. Whereas in the past that wouldn't necessarily happen, but it's certainly no issue now. And absolutely critical in every case.
Yes. It's a good way of getting people together when it's done remotely at a distance.
Absolutely.
Quite well from my experience.
It's critical because you often find out things that aren't in the report for whatever reason. It's not a criticism at all. It's just sometimes you only get those little nuggets from having a conversation with the expert, and those kinds of things can be case winners or potentially case losers.
Yes. Starting on a positive note then, to the experts, can you describe some examples of good communication between lawyer and expert and how that's helped a case to run smoothly?
I would say, shall I go first?
Yes, yeah, sorry, Lucy, I was just...
I would say, yeah, cases generally run smoothly when I'm able to have good communication, not just from the technical perspective of having somebody who replies to emails promptly and who I'm able to get hold of on the phone if needed, but also communicates well in the way that they instruct me, the way that they communicate what they need from me. I usually find that's fairly clear at the outset of the case, but then as the case progresses, when a lawyer comes back to me for further input, it's not always quite so clear. So, for example, when I'm doing work for indemnity providers, I may have done a report based on allegations in the letter of claim. Things may have progressed, and there may be particulars of claim now that may be quite different from the letter of claim. The allegations may be quite different. There may be additional allegations in the particulars of claim. And when I'm asked to give additional input, sometimes it's not clear to me in what form that needs to be. Do they just want me to fire back an email with some comments? Do they want me to provide a report addendum? Or do they want me to completely rewrite my report based on the allegations and the particulars of claim rather than the letter of claim? So I find that the communication can get a little bit more confusing deeper into the case than it tends to be at the outset.
So it sounds like you need really clear instructions then as to exactly what it is that's expected of you at each stage.
Yes.
And do you have any other examples of where you encountered difficulties in communicating with lawyers?
So difficulties, as I say, would just be if it's hard to get replies by email, difficult to get hold of people on the phone, and if the instructions that are given to me aren't particularly clear. An example of something that would be really appallingly bad communication would be where I've received instructions through an agency for a case of an injury, and I'm sent some medical records but no dental records, and I'm told that the patient has had an accident, but I haven't been told what the accident is. And in the medical records, there's nothing to suggest that there's been any dental injury, and I haven't been sent any dental records, and they want me to quote a fee for the report. But I don't know what accident it is that they've had, and I don't know what their dental injuries were. So how can I possibly quote a fee? How do I know what's going to be involved in that report? So that would be an example of particularly bad communication.
So it sounds like good communication starts with good instructions, really, at the outset, and then continuing clear instructions, and also ideally being responsive in emails. Obviously, it's understandable people can be really busy, but not leaving it too long so that you kind of forget about the case, and then it's difficult to pick it up again. Is that right? Yes,
I think that's right. I mean, I've had the same experiences as Lucy's had over the years. You tend to find the good cases are the ones where the solicitor does communicate well.
So you find that the cases tend to go better?
Yes, yeah.
So does it make sense? Richard, do you have anything to add? Any examples that go the other way where you struggled in communicating with an expert?
Yeah, I think it's important for both lawyers and experts to remember that it's a collaborative process.
Yeah.
And notwithstanding the fact that, of course, the expert's overriding duty is to the court, that the expert instructed is trying to assist in furthering the case. I had a conference with an expert a few weeks ago who was extremely defensive, refusing to make even the smallest alterations to the report that he'd already written. And it almost came to the point where I had to say, or invited my solicitor to say, look, we are working together here. You as the expert are here to inform us as to the standard of care that was required in this particular circumstance. Please try and work with us rather than trying to work against us. And communication is at the heart of that, of course.
Yeah. It's a team sport, I think. Everybody's got to be on board.
Yes. So this is to both of the experts. Can you give 3 top tips on how lawyers can improve their communication with the expert?
I think Lucy better start on this one.
Yes, well, I mean, it's everything that I've said, really. So to summarise, it's being responsive to emails, being available on the phone if needed, and being clear in the instructions.
Yeah, exactly.
What about you, Mike? What would be your thought?
Well, exactly the same things. I can't think of anything to add to that.
Richard, what about you? Do you have any tips from your experience?
Yes, acronyms. Oh my God. I've never known a field that has so many acronyms.
Do you watch Line of Duty?
Yeah, quite.
Richard, because that's full of it.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a chiz in the OCG.
Yeah.
But here, I mean, on one of the other blogs we've done, Louisa, you mentioned one of the acronyms. It's amazing how often, and it's perfectly understandable because as experts, you are obviously expert in your field, and sometimes forget that you might be explaining a situation to someone who's never read a medico-legal report in the field of dentistry before. And I know it's often one particular expert who I work with a lot always provides a very helpful glossary of terms at the end of his report, which has about 20 acronyms on it. So that would be one tip I would suggest. The other thing is transparency. In one case that I had, the expert had written his report, and we came to have the essential conference, and it was only when the 4 of us turned up for conference that the expert said, well, actually, I'd perhaps better tell you this, but I was actually asked to investigate this particular dental practitioner about 10 years ago, because there had been things that perhaps shouldn't have happened that had happened. And it was like, oh my goodness, why on earth didn't you mention this before? So it just goes back to the critical aspect, which is communication, because it's so important that things like that are mentioned at a very early stage.
Yes, so openly discussing any conflict.
Absolutely.
And acronyms, yes. Actually, coming to that point, we were thinking about potentially offering some basic training to solicitors firms who work in dental negligence, just on understanding the basics of dentistry, the notes, what BPE means, for example, and so on, and what the charting means, and just some basic charting. So if anyone thinks that would be helpful, that then do feel free to get in touch.
And the other point I would make is that, as of course we are all aware, the way that the Judicial College guidelines are structured are in terms of whether there is loss of or serious damage to either front teeth or back teeth. And it's funny how often you'll read a report, and unless you're familiar with the terms that are being used and the descriptions that are given, you might not necessarily know if the injury has been to front teeth or back teeth, or where, to be honest, where the tooth is in the mouth. So I think it's often very helpful just to have a very basic layman's summary of what has happened at the start before the expert descends into the detail. Yeah,
so summary and a glossary as well. And as I
how I tend to approach it is the first time I use a technical term in the report, I'll put in brackets what that is in layman's terms next to it, because I find I don't want to inconvenience somebody by them having to flip through to the glossary every so often. So I find it easier to explain things as I go along.
This dentistry is, I suppose, a very unique field of medicine, and the terminology is so different for someone who doesn't read dental negligence reports regularly. I suppose it can take some time for a lawyer to sort of get their head around it. Which is why we thought that we could come out and provide some training just on basic tooth charting, periodontal examinations and so on, if that would be helpful. But yes, thank you again to Lucy, Mike and Richard for discussing with me today the matter of communication between expert and lawyer, the importance of it, examples of when it works well, examples of when it goes wrong, and how lawyers can improve their cases by working to make sure that communication between the expert and the lawyer is as smooth as possible. Thank you also to everyone for joining us for this vlog, and I hope to see you all in the next one. Goodbye from all of us for now.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.